You never realize what you have until it's gone. That's what everyone says, right? Well, I'm Grace, 29, and I've learned that lesson the hard way. I never thought one careless comment, one drunken confession could ruin everything I had. But here I am, sitting alone in this empty apartment, staring at the divorce papers my husband handed me, wondering how everything went so wrong. Ryan and I had been married for 5 years. In the beginning, I thought I hit the jackpot. He wasn't perfect, but he was good to me. He had a steady job as an IT consultant, which didn't sound glamorous, but it paid the bills. I worked as a marketing coordinator, earning a decent salary that kept us comfortable. We rented a small but cozy apartment and had big dreams of owning a house one day. Life wasn't extraordinary, but it was simple, and for the most part, it worked. Ryan was always there for me, fixing things around the apartment, planning little surprises, and being the responsible, reliable husband. My friends would say how lucky I was to have such a solid, dependable guy. I'd smile and nod, but if I'm honest, deep down, I always thought I could do better. There was a part of me that wondered if I'd settled too early, especially when I saw my friends dating successful guys in high-powered careers. Everything started to shift when Ryan got promoted to senior management. He was suddenly making a lot more money, and at first, I thought it would be great. We'd be able to save for a house, go on vacations, maybe even start a family. But then something changed in him. With the promotion came a new sense of control over our finances. He started questioning every purchase I made, setting up budgets and talking about long-term financial planning like it was the only thing that mattered. "You don't really need another pair of shoes, Grace," he'd say, glancing at the bags I'd bring home. "We need to save for a down payment, remember?" It started to feel suffocating. I worked hard too. Sure, he paid the rent and most of the bills, but I paid for my own car, my own groceries. In my mind, if I had extra money, it was mine to spend however I wanted. But Ryan acted like every dollar should be going into our joint savings account. I hated feeling like I had to justify every little purchase, so I started a secret account. It wasn't anything shady. It was just a way to stash away a little bit from each paycheck so I could buy things without getting the third degree from him. At first, I told myself it was because he was being controlling, that his new promotion had gone to his head, but deep down, I knew I was just being selfish. Then, of course, that's when Laura came into the picture. Laura was the new girl at work, bubbly, confident, and carefree. She was the complete opposite of me, living her best life, traveling, dating around, always posting on social media about her adventures. She listened when I vented about Ryan, validated all my complaints, and told me how lucky I was to have a man who actually cared about me. "You know, my ex was the same way," Laura would say, nodding sympathetically. "They get a little bit of power, and suddenly they think they control everything. I totally get it." And the more I vented, the more I started to see Ryan through a different lens. He wasn't just the responsible, reliable man I married. He was controlling, suffocating, and so boring. My complaints escalated, and I told myself I deserved more. I was just so tired of being tied down by his rules. Ryan started making suggestions for date nights and weekends away, but I couldn't be bothered. I'd complained to Laura about how boring he was and how he didn't understand my need for freedom. When Ryan mentioned starting a family, I shut down immediately. "We can't afford kids," I snapped, even though we had been saving and were actually in a good financial position. But all I could think about was my secret account, the money I was stashing away for a future I hadn't yet planned. One evening, after a few too many drinks at a happy hour with Laura, I found myself confiding more than I should have. "I'd cheat if I knew I'd never get caught," I blurted out, laughing at how ridiculous it sounded. "He's so controlling, like he thinks I'm his property or something." Laura laughed along, but I didn't notice the darkness in her eyes. Instead, I felt validated, like my frustrations were justified. What I didn't realize was that my words had been a seed, one that would eventually sprout and destroy everything. The next day, things felt off with Ryan. He asked about a $200 charge on our joint account. I played it off, but my mind was already racing, thinking about how I had hidden that money in my secret account, a little stash to fuel my escape. "You don't need to know everything I buy, Ryan," I snapped, feeling defensive. He seemed hurt, but I didn't care. Then came the party. Memorial Day weekend, and Ryan suggested hosting a small barbecue for his work friends. I didn't want to. I never wanted to, but I agreed out of obligation. The whole time, I complained to Laura about how Ryan was trying to control everything, about how suffocating he was. When the party started, I threw myself into the wine and made sure to stay close to Laura and Craig from accounting, a man who had always made me feel seen, even though I knew I was pushing the boundaries of what was appropriate. By the time the party had wound down, I was several glasses of wine deep and feeling bold. Ryan came to ask me to start wrapping things up, and I snapped at him in front of everyone. Always so controlling, I muttered loud enough for the whole group to hear. I didn't care that it was embarrassing. I didn't care that I was humiliating him. I didn't care about anything. What I didn't know was that Ryan had been standing at the door listening. He hadn't said a word, but the look on his face said everything. He just turned and walked away. The next morning, I woke up to an empty house. No sign of Ryan. His car was gone. His things were missing. It was like he vanished. I called and texted, but there was no response. By the time I heard from him again, it was late afternoon, and he'd come home carrying a duffel bag. His eyes were cold, unreadable. "I need some time to think," he said, his voice flat. He handed me a folder. Divorce papers. My heart dropped. "I'm filing for divorce, Grace," he said calmly. "You've made it clear that you don't respect me, don't value our marriage, and are actively planning to cheat if the opportunity arises." My mind spun. This couldn't be real. "It was just talk," I pleaded. "Just a joke? I didn't mean it." But Ryan wasn't buying it. "It wasn't just talk, Grace. It was the truth." And just like that, everything I had was gone. The next few months were a blur. I tried to fix things, but it was too late. Ryan had already moved on. He sold the apartment, took half of everything, and walked away from the life we had built together. I was left to pick up the pieces of my broken life. I thought I could handle it, but the reality hit me hard. I wasn't ready for life without Ryan, without the comfort of knowing he was there. I'd lost everything, all because of a stupid comment, one drunken slip-up that I never thought would have consequences. As I sit here now, in this tiny apartment with bills piling up and no one to call but Laura, I realize the harsh truth. I did this to myself. I pushed Ryan away, and now he's gone, and I'll never get him back. If I could go back, I would take back every word I said. But life doesn't work that way. There's no rewind button. All I can do now is face the consequences and hope that someday I'll learn enough from this mistake to deserve someone half as good as the man I threw away.